Welcome back to DecentraLounge, brought to you by GlobalStake, your truly decentralized SOC 2 Type 2 certified institutional bare metal blockchain infrastructure provider. I'm your host, Ryan Hazinski, head of protocol partnerships, along with my co-host, Wyatt Clancy, our VP of growth. On today's episode, we welcome Karthik Senthil, a venture partner at Lattice Fund. Karthik has been involved in crypto and emerging technology for over a decade, with experience spanning investing, research, and ecosystem development. Before joining Lattice, he worked across both traditional finance and early stage tech and crypto, giving him a strong perspective on how decentralized systems evolve from experimental ideas into real scalable systems. At Lattice Fund, Karthik focuses on identifying and supporting foundational blockchain infrastructure, protocols, and applications, backing teams that are building the core layers of the crypto stack rather than chasing short-term trends. Today, we'll talk about Karthik's path into the crypto industry, how he thinks about investing in early stage blockchain projects, and what he looks for in teams and technologies that have the potential to shape the next wave of Web3 adoption. Karthik, welcome to DecentraLounge. Why don't we start off just with how you got involved in this industry? And you have an amazing backstory and so much to unpack.
First of all, thanks so much for having me. Really appreciate it. My story into crypto started around the 2016, 2017 timeframe. I had just joined Amazon. I had been a founder in healthcare previously and just joined Amazon. And, I'd heard about Bitcoin before, but kind of largely brushed it off. But as I I had a bit of time heading into my Amazon kind of employment to go read the Bitcoin white paper and listen to some podcasts about it. And one thing that kind of stood out to me that was just different from the way I had looked at before is coming from a background in software, the ability to go modify code, was seen as a feature, right? It's like you ship quickly. If there's a bug, if a customer wants a new feature, if you think of something different, the ability to go, modify a website or an app and kind of iterate through quickly, like product iteration, was obviously a very common thing in tech and startups. And that was kind of seen as a feature where you can kind of go move quickly and then just be able to grow, right? And what Bitcoin was really unique in terms of the way that it saw the world was this notion of assured or guaranteed behavior. There was nothing that one could do outside of getting the majority of validators and token holders to agree, effectively forking the protocol, that could actually change the behavior of the protocol. It was going to have 21 million coins. It was going to issue a certain amount of coins on a per epoch basis. It was going to behave the same way, regardless of what you felt. If people felt that it was too slow, too fast, too cheap, too expensive. And I thought that was just a very fascinating way to think about kind of a new software ideology, for lack of a better word. You had this kind of Silicon Valley move quick and break things perspective, and then you had this Bitcoin way of doing things, which is very much codified, assured behavior, which kind of lends itself very well to money prospects, where you don't really want the behavior of your money to be changing on a week in, week out basis. So that's what really got me into crypto, and just kind of seeing that divergence or that kind of different school of thought from a computing perspective. And then, certainly got more interested in Bitcoin with the 2017 bull market and began to kind of think through, like, what does, non-sovereign money look like, digital gold, all that kind of stuff. And then found my way to Ethereum and other places. But that was kind of my entry point into crypto.
Was it you also intrigued by the monetary aspect of it as well, just because of your background in traditional finance and kind of merging those two with the software aspect?
Yeah, absolutely. Something I forgot to mention is I actually worked at Goldman during the Great Financial Crisis. And so I remember actually I took some vacation and I was coming back to work and I wasn't sure if I would still have a job, because it was like, basically when all these things were playing out. I worked, and, at that time there was this whole thing around obviously like bailing out the banks, and obviously Bitcoin was born in that story. So I was definitely at that time even a fan of like, hey, the bailing out the banks and stuff just felt very unjust in that moment of time. And so obviously that naturally led itself to kind of my interest in Bitcoin. Obviously, as many people know, bank bailouts was something inscribed in when the first one of the first or the very first kind of transactions like on the Bitcoin ledger. And kind of my hot take is a little bit adjacent, but kind of my hot take with a lot of what's kind of happened, at least in U.S. policy and U.S. politics, is really a reflection of the Great Financial Crisis. I think that was like the original sin that that the government made, where they, because of the reaction to what happened in the GFC, and you could argue that that was needed just from an economic perspective. I think to me that was the crack in the armor of the lack of of the distrust of institutions. I think that's the moment in time in modern history where people really felt that there was a social compact and that was broken. And I think you've just seen a lot of the fallout over the past 15 years. You could point to a lot of things, right? You could point to wealth disparity. You could point to obviously the recent political elections. Whichever way you feel about your politics, I feel like that was kind of like the original kind of root of modern America. So yeah, for sure, 100%.
It's crazy to think that that was almost 20 years ago now. Like when you were saying it, I'm going, man, that it still feels like yesterday, but it's really interesting that you see that as sort of the crack in the armor. And you know, having lived through this myself, I could totally see that. Well, I mean, obviously you had this storied career at Amazon and, you know, you were doing some really cool things there, but then you made this pretty hard right pivot, right? I mean, it's not often that we hear about people going from a Goldman Sachs to an Amazon to into crypto. And what was it about? And maybe touch on some of the places you've stopped, because you've done some amazing work, whether it was at Circle or ZK Sync, and you know, how did you make that leap, and what was it like that really took you down the rabbit hole to the point where now you're sort of this investor, and you know you're coming in as a VC. You know, how did that position and change happen, and kind of get us into the weeds a little bit here?
Yeah, I think a common through line in how I've thought about career kind of stems from my early time at Goldman. At Goldman, you know, I'm going to sound like a boomer here, but you know, when I first, you know, started my career back in 2004, actually, even a little bit before Goldman, it was kind of, at least the norm then, was like, you're going to be at a company, you're going to be there for many years, and then you might make a move every, you know, so many years to maybe a better company. But it was kind of this thing where you're going to be there for a while. And I was at Goldman for 8 years, and I think what I realized there towards the end was like, hey, I really didn't achieve the level of growth that I wanted to. I felt like my growth was linear, and I think in your 20s, it's really, really important for you always to be looking for exponential. It doesn't have to necessarily be money related. It could be learning, it could be your network, it could be a whole host of things. I think what you really want to avoid is saying, hey, I'm at this cool job, I like it. I like the people, but I'm not really growing exponentially. And for me, being at Goldman, I certainly grew very linearly. And as I kind of realized that, I was like, hey, I got to make some changes in how I approach career. So in some ways, a lot of the stops I've kind of made is a little bit of a catch-up trade to the fact that I did fall behind from a growth perspective in my 20s, or at least from my vantage point. And so from Goldman, I went directly into startups. I joined a consumer startup here in New York. That was, you know, chaotic, but a lot of fun. Spent a year as a healthcare founder, which, you know, we can hopefully maybe have some time to dig into that, but it's kind of a chaotic industry. Although I think that, you know, AI is actually going to be the right modality that will meaningfully transform it. And then, like you mentioned, spent 4.5 years at Amazon, which was a great experience. But yeah, like I mentioned, I think as I hop from these different areas, for me, it was about, hey, I almost look at it like for basketball fans out there, something LeBron said kind of has stuck with me, where he's like, I kind of look at my career 4 years at a time, kind of like and he kind of thinks about what do I want to go do in these next 4 years, and then like let me reassess like where I'm at, and you can kind of see like how he's moved from, you know, the initial Cleveland years to Miami to Cleveland. They're all kind of like in the same kind of broader time frame. So for me, it's not necessarily a 4-year playbook, but it's like, hey, I kind of want to go run at this really hard, this whatever this next space is, for 3 to 4 years. Try to go where I think there's like an opportunity to grow exponentially, have asymmetric outcomes, whether it comes from growth or financially or otherwise. And then if I feel like I'm plateauing, look for the next growth opportunity. So for me, having been at Amazon for 4 years, I learned a ton. It was, you really one of my favorite places I've ever worked at. But I did feel like there was a plateau beginning to emerge over the last 9 to 12 months. Crypto's been something that I had been thinking about quite a bit. I was busy at Amazon during the crypto bear market in 2018 and 2019, and that's where a lot of opportunity kind of formed in terms of being early to things, and both financially and from a growth perspective. So when 2021 came around, I was like, hey, I really want to sink my teeth into crypto. It just felt like a fascinating place where there was this really interesting eclectic mix of people that were from tech, from culture, from finance, from distributed systems, kind of a really interesting mix of people. It felt like it's its own little world, own little industry. And for me, my goal entering crypto was like, hey, I want to go in and meaningfully impact this industry and basically be like someone that everybody in the industry knows, and I'm a core contributor to the industry at some level. So that was kind of my goal when I started the journey. I started as a founder, and then I've spent a bunch of time operating and investing. And I feel like I've largely achieved that goal, but we can talk through that. But that was kind of like the way I think about it. And even as the next thing I'm going to be working on, it's a similar kind of thought process. Have I plateaued? And if so, what's the next opportunity for rapid growth?
So here's a question for you, and it might be a selfish one because I'm actually very interested in it. So coming from Goldman, founder, Amazon, et cetera, all very much in the traditional finance realm, though, when you finally made that pivot, as Ryan said, into crypto, started investing, started building, when you look back, what do you think you did right coming from a traditional finance mindset, and what do you think as someone that was coming into it now should look at that you've learned from all of your experience? What would you go back and change about how you looked at companies that you were investing in crypto versus traditional finance?
It's a really good question. I think what I did right, crypto is such a nascent industry, and I think a lot of these industries are pretty nascent, right? Even to some degree, AI, robotics, some of the other things that are out there, nuclear. There's a huge upside for someone who's been able to be in traditional industry, whether it's finance, software, whatever, and just understanding the right way to think about building. Like, what's one of the big things Amazon taught me is like, how should you actually think about customers, about product, about goals, about teams, and bring that into an immature industry is a big advantage for somebody, because it's a really good way to make outsized impact. Because if you're at Amazon, everybody kind of thinks similarly because they've kind of been indoctrinated with the way that you should think about things. You take that knowledge and bring it to somewhere that's more nascent. It's like a really big advantage. So I would say that's like the big advantage you have if you've come from more traditional background. I would say what I probably could have done better or would have done differently from a crypto perspective is to just go be a user more and like less of a listener. I think a lot of the ways I learned was like listening to the podcast, which is super invaluable, listening to all of our favorite VCs opine about crypto. And I totally learned that, but a lot of it was like borrowed conviction. It was like, hey, I heard, and I don't want to name drop anybody, but I heard person X, talk about DeFi. I heard person Y talk about Ethereum. Like, that sounds really interesting. Like, I should maybe invest in these things. I think what I wish I did earlier, and I've kind of hopefully corrected this, is just go be a user of some of these things and kind of try to form early conviction, or at least an early opinion by yourself. Because what ends up happening, especially in these fast-moving spaces, is if your conviction is borrowed, when the tide turns, it's difficult to know if you should be in the thing, whether you're trading it, whether you're holding it, whether you're working there. It's difficult to know that. So you kind of want to form this opinion for yourself so that you have a little bit of stability, if things change on the ground, if that makes sense.
Well, I guess the perfect follow-up then would be, with that change, obviously you have a lot of your own conviction, a lot of your own sort of thoughts on matters. You wrote an incredible long-form article on X about sort of the merger of crypto or blockchain, specifically the rails and AI. This is a huge hot topic right now. And you also reference healthcare in an area that could be radically transformed by AI. So let's dig into that. I mean, what's your conviction like now? What are the things that you feel are going to be on trend for the coming years? And, obviously you're really interested in sort of the blockchain AI space as well. So would love to dig into that more.
Absolutely. So let me start with where I think a lot of people in crypto get crypto times XAI, like the intersection wrong. In crypto, just having spent a ton of time in the space over the past 8 years, the general line of thinking is that eventually everyone uses tech. So let's just go build for this future, and like the tide will turn for us, right? And that hasn't necessarily been the wrong way to build. Like obviously things like Bitcoin and Ethereum have kind of, just from a valuation perspective, have been able to kind of, back into that. But as a builder, right, it's often a very challenging way to think about things because you're building for something that doesn't even exist today, much less like you don't know what the shape of these things are, right? And that's where you've seen a lot of product market fit challenges where people are like, hey, I'm gonna go build, decentralized Uber or some new L1. And it's more for, we have this kind of intellectual thesis of where the world is going, but not necessarily not one more than reality. And so a lot of the stuff you see in crypto and AI, for the large part, not all of it, is this kind of notion that, hey, there is going to be agents that one day are paying for everything. They'll naturally use blockchain. Let me go build some infrastructure for that, whether it's 402 or that new L1. There is going to be, a need for compute. So let me go build this huge decentralized, cluster of GPUs and wait for demand to come, right? And so crypto, generally speaking, has typically had a demand problem. They've usually had supply. Supply's been abundant, whether it's block space or tokens, but demand has kind of been the challenge. And I think DeepIn's like another example of this, right? So my view on crypto, that XAI, like I do 100% believe that crypto rails and blockchains will be the foundational economic like substrate for AI. This is kind of where this is like going to be the layer where a lot of coordination and value movement happens. But I think it's really important for builders in this space to think about, what do AI builders actually need right now? Like AI builders, like agents and models aren't good enough to be autonomous, to go, trade money, at least autonomously, like make micropayments. Like all those things will happen, but you don't know if it's going to happen in 2 years or 10 years. If you really unpack what AI builders need today, and from having talked to them quite a bit over the past 6 to 9 months, the biggest need that they have today that really isn't solved by anybody is this notion of, how can I go build a specialized model? And how could I continuously fine tune that without going to go spend I don't know if this is a rated R podcast, but like a crap ton of money on AI engineers and data and all this kind of stuff. Because historically, there's kind of been one way to build a model, which is what I call company formation, where you just basically build the pipeline end to end in house, and obviously it's very expensive. And like this is like what the frontier labs do. The thesis that I have is that most AI companies use OpenAI's model or Gemini or Claude, but over time, in order for them to really build differentiated products, they're going to need to own their own specialized models. And these models, I'm not saying they should replace OpenAI, but they should complement them and do some of the super core functions of what that product does. Like that model should be better at that than any other model. And that's kind of where you build a moat, right? Where you're getting data on that core function as your users use it, and your model kind of keeps getting better and better and better and better at that. My view is that for many of these teams, they don't want to go spend a ton of money and resources to go do this, and that's kind of why they put it off to a large degree. And I think where crypto can really help, and this is the kind of the crux of the piece, is this notion of building a crowdsourced training pipeline. Or imagine if there was a place where you can say, hey, look, I have this maybe initial model, but I really want the ability for people across the internet to contribute to it in a heterogeneous set of ways. It's not just providing compute, because that's not enough for me. I need compute. I might need data. I might need different evals. I might need maybe a new RL technique or reward function. You kind of need a whole host of things. And the idea would be that crypto can serve as this coordination layer amongst all these participants and really begin to stitch all this stuff together in a way where people can basically co-engineer this together and share upside. So the kind of the analog I would use for this is basically open source software. Like open source software was this way for people to build a coalition on the internet and build awesome software. My view is like the next era of open source software will come from like basically open source or kind of crowdsourced model scaling. So to me, this is a big opportunity in crypto AI, so to speak. I think the things I talked about, the long-term stuff in crypto and AI will certainly be there. But because it's not a paramount issue for a lot of AI builders, I think it's super important to be kind of product focused as a crypto builder.
So one last question, and forgive me if it's going to be the answer you just gave us, but you've afforded yourself a lot of latitude to really explore what you want to explore because of the success you've had in your past, right? You've built this ability to really do a deep dive into the topics that interest you. So if someone forced you to answer for the next 12 months, you had to look at one specific part of the market, whether it's crypto, TradFi, macro, micro, what would you spend your next 12 months? And as an extension of that, what do you think the viewers should spend the next 12 months looking at extremely intensely and at a depth perspective?
That's a great question. To me, the answer is pretty simple. I think it's vertical AI. I think the same cycle we saw in software where there's going to be winners across verticals, across each vertical, where the company or winning companies focuses on this use case, 24/7 and builds deep relationships with their customers and builds awesome experiences for that use case. We'll see the same thing in the AI playbook and like the specialized models and some of the stuff I talked about. So I think the opportunity really is, especially like for startups, right? The opportunity is, can you take an AI native stance and design into a sector and go build for that in a way that kind of you're able to outcompete your software incumbents? So I think this is a huge opportunity, and you're starting to see this already play out, right? Like Cursor is kind of going into coding, Sierra is going into customer service. I think you'll start seeing this kind of continue to play out. And I think this is the big opportunity. And like last thing I'll add is if you think about a lot of the huge market sectors that exist today, things like healthcare, education, biotech, like these things haven't changed that much if you think about it in the past 15 or 20 years. If you think about the last time maybe it's been a while for us since we've gone to school, but if you think about going to a classroom, going to a doctor's office, they're pretty much the same as they were 15, 20 years ago. And in my view, it's because software just doesn't offer the right modality for change in these sectors, because ultimately it's a tool for completing a task. And the people in these sectors, they're in this industry not to make their business more efficient. They don't think about it as a product. They think about it as a purpose. Like, I want to go deliver the best healthcare or the best learning outcomes. And so they only want to use tools that can really do that. And like software is just not the right form factor for that. I think AI is going to be able to completely transform these sectors because it can not only do a kind of abstract away a whole set of workflows, not just individual tasks, but the really exciting thing is it's going to allow these founders to kind of go direct to consumer, the same way that like Uber and Airbnb did it with software as a form factor, 10, 15 years ago. And you're going to be able to say, hey, look, I could sell my AI tooling and stuff to hospitals. I can also create my own hospital or my own clinic and really just make it AI native. And what would that look like? And we're starting to see this. Like, I think there was I think Doctronic is the first AI doctor that can prescribe medicine. I think I saw that on Twitter a few days ago. Alpha School is this new school that's AI native in its approach. So I think you're going to see a lot more direct to consumer plays, and I think this is like a really interesting area to focus on. So this is going to be my like big focus for the next 12 months and beyond.
Great. I mean, incredibly interesting. It makes a lot of sense. So building upon that, for the viewers that are listening, where can they follow along to your learnings, your writing, and what you're building?
Yeah, no. The best place to follow me is on Twitter. My handle is Karthik Senthil, K-A-R, and my last name. I have some exciting stuff going on. I'm going to be making a hopefully pretty splashy announcement on kind of what I've been working on, hopefully by the time this airs. But yeah, DM's always open. So if you're a founder building something interesting in vertical AI or in crypto infra, always happy to chat and be helpful.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for taking the time to be with us today, Karthik. Great overview about what you're doing. And I, as one who has been reading your writing, I am captivated by your thought process. And so this was awesome to have this conversation and really kind of dig into it. For those who are watching or listening to today's episode of DecentraLounge, we'll be sure to link those socials so you can keep up with Karthik yourself. And we'll see you next time on the next episode of DecentraLounge. Take care, everybody.
Thanks, guys.